your side for you to see. Yeah, okay, great. So that's appearing now. Oh, wow. It's so good to see so many of you. Well done. And Jamila, I think Jamila should be here. And Sam
Yes, I'm
Peng,
here.
thank you. Yes, hi, Jamila. Okay, then, so welcome. So this is a part of the Deptford X initiative, which is a festival of celebrating Deptford. Our contribution as I myself as a university lecturer at Goldsmiths and my students as students within the Culture and Society module within the undergraduate sociology degree programme. So we have been working in respect to issues in terms of anti-race-based hair discrimination as part of a British Academy and Leverhulme Trust funded awards. And so I have a set of slides which I'd like to be able to use in terms of the presentation. The presentation involves partly myself and also Alexandra and Chun and the other two students as well will also contribute. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just share screen. And if you could tell me when you can see the slides. Chan, could you tell me when you can see the slides? Can you see the slides?
I couldn't see it right now. Oh, yes, now I can see it.
You can see it. Okay, then. So let's start. Okay, so it's only an hour-long presentation. And okay, so the title of the presentation is Weaving the Strands of African and Caribbean Diaspora. My name is Pamela Odih. I'm a member of staff within the Sociology department at Goldsmiths. I will also be co-presenting with Alexandra and Chun, who are undergraduate students within the Sociology department at Goldsmiths. Okay, so just to introduce the project, it's a British Academy and Leverhulme Trust project entitled Challenging Hair Discrimination Through Racial Narratives, Industry Knowledge on the Economics of Hair and Counter-Literacy, Equality, Diversity Strategies. In terms of the construction of today's very short presentation, we will be looking at what I'm describing as weaving the strands of African and Caribbean diaspora. I'll look at Deptford's colonial history in terms of what I'm describing as an Afro-scripting. I will look at also the present of Deptford's Black hairdressers in terms of the work that's been conducted by my students in relation to what we're describing as a photo elicitation of Black hairdressers. And we'll have a discussion of the visual imagery. Then we'll have just a brief reading of a poem that has been written in relation to the data that is derived from the photo elicitations. And then also we'll look at my recent travels in terms of Cornwall and the links that I'm making there between Deptford and Truro, Cornwall. Okay then, so just to start, in terms of the introduction to the project, as I said, it's a British Leverhulme Trust, British Academy and Leverhulme Trust study that is looking at issues in terms of hair discrimination through racial narratives. Now, there are several findings of the project. The finding I'm going to focus on today is described as selective acculturation. And here I'm referring to the strategies that young people use to actually be able to navigate the conflicting influences of school and cultural identity in terms of hair as a signifier of belonging. And this has brought, we focus very much here in terms of Deptford, and to put the reason why Deptford is so special into context. It's not only just geographically very closely related to the university at Goldsmiths, but it also has I think, a very significant colonial history. And so what I'm going to do here is actually allow the students to just be able to provide a brief description of the history of what I think is a key agent and a key representative of the recognizing the sort of cultural history, identity, and belonging that can be articulated in respect to hair. And this key agent is Olahoda Equiani. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is actually allow my students to actually just provide a description, and this is going to be from mainstream writings in the Britannica and the BBC,
which ended when he and lecturing against the cruelty of British enslaves in Jamaica.
Okay. Okay, did you want to add anything to that, John?
Oh, yes. So Aquiana was subsequently enslaved by two other purchased. His emancipation in 1766. After Aquiana settled in England, he became an active abolitionist. And he received some education during his enslavement, which ended when he and lecturing against the culture of British enslaves in Jamaica.
Excellent. That's very good. Okay, that's very good. Okay, and so that's very much the sort of mainstream account of Equiano. And my students have been skilled in actually being able to decode mainstream sort of reportage. And so one of the things that I have been doing has been looking at how we can actually be able to reread Equiano's famous book, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African. And what I've been doing is actually rereading that in relation to a technique that I've been describing as Afro-scripting, which is really centering Black experience and the embodiment of Black experience as a means to actually be able to recenter a narrative in terms of racialized characteristics. And the racialized characteristic here I'm focusing on is the in terms of Afro-textured hair. And so what I've done is reread the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano and picked out from that the way that he uses hair as a signifier for both his subjugation, his enslavement, his transportation, but also he uses hair as a means to describe his emancipation and his agency and his cultural contribution in terms of an economy. And so which is an original and a different way of actually reading this famous first person Black narrative. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually look at the entangled histories, okay, of the cultural politics of Black African hairdressing and its roots. And I'm going to look at that through an Afro-scripting of Olaudah's The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano. Okay, then. So as Alex as Chana said, so he was born in 1745 in a Nigerian village, an Igbo village. I'm also from the Igbo tribe, although born and bred in Britain. Now, in the interesting narrative of his life, he initially talks about, obviously, the traditional African and pre-colonial histories. And here he talks about the way in which African people celebrated festivals, and in terms of sort of triumphant battles as well. And he talks about here how people would rejoice in public dance and celebration. But one of the things I found interesting is that he very much talks about how these public celebrations often involved forms of division and separation in terms of, for example, the married men being separated from married women, and unmarried men being separated from unmarried women, and how in these various separated divisions there were like specific forms of celebration that were carried out. And I think that that notion of dividing and celebrating, and in terms of sort of contemporary stories being told, is very much acquainted with the way in which Afro hair is actually sort of divided and separated, and how it actually also tells various stories in relation to sort of current life. And so in the early part of his book, when he is talking about these festivals, Afro hair appears very much as being these incredible sort of forms of articulating sort of tradition and celebrating cultural identity in really sort of positive ways. He then, and so we can, if we actually do a sort of a search in terms of imagery in relation to pre-colonial times, we start to see these notions that in pre-colonial traditional Africa, hair was very much a signifier of tribal identity, a celebration in relation to sort of triumphs in terms of the tribe, and also means of actually being able to sort of like categorize and distinguish sort of the life course of the individual. And so hair here, that's how hair very much appears in when Equiano talks about his earlier experiences. Now, in the book, the interesting narrative, he also starts to as he charts his situation of abduction. He also starts to identify sort of key sort of issues in terms of the capture and the sort of control initially in pre-colonial times, but in terms of slavery, those sort of initial sort of outliers in which, for example, the Portuguese in their settlements in, for example, Sierra Leone, and the role that they very much played there in terms of capturing and controlling this ordinarily sort of sovereign nation. And here appears again in his narrative, if you look closely, if you do a close enough reading. So he talks about how there are mixtures of Sierra Leone, sort of Portuguese with the traditional Sierra Leoneans, and how this actually starts to produce what he describes very much in terms of the hair signifier. So he talks about how where the inhabitants are bred from a mixture of the first Portuguese discoverers with the natives, and are now becoming their complexion and in the woolly quality of their hair, perfect Negroes retaining, however, a smattering of Portuguese language. So hair is appearing here as a signifier of the capture and the settlement, imposed settlement of the Portuguese, and this is obviously in the 18th century. And but we know that so he writes about how in obviously born in 1745, around sort of 1757 or so, he's captured. He's captured as an 11-year-old. And he here again uses hair as a signifier for his experience. In a way, it's almost like the visuality of the experience is very much captured in these sort of metaphors and in these adjectives and descriptions and relate that involve, once again, hair. So he talks about obviously the horror of actually realizing that this is a situation that is happening to him, and he starts to talk about the people that are involved in his capture, and he says their complexions too, and this is all primary sourced from the first edition of Equiana's autobiography. So he talks about their complexions too differing so much from ours, their long hair and the language they spoke, united to confirm in this belief. Indeed, such was the horrors of my views and fears at the moment that if 10,000 worlds had been my own, I would have freely parted with them all to have exchanged my condition with that of a meaner slave in my own country. So he's using the signifier of hair, and the long hair is the European, and the European who is captured and is forcibly transporting him. Okay, then, so he's now the story of his transportation is also, I think there are sort of like sensory aspects to the way in which he describes his place and experience in terms of the forced transportation. So he is forcibly transported as a child. So he's captured around 11. He's forcibly transported first to the West Indies, okay, and then Virginia, where he's brought by Captain Pascal. They travel as he is captive to various lands. He is, as part of the naval ship that he's traveling with Captain Pascal, he's brought to mainland England. He's brought into the coast of Cornwall, and he's brought into a place called Falmouth. And one of the stories that he tells, once again, this way that he uses his sensory experience as well as the signifier of hair. So he talks about a situation whereby he's on board the ship, and what he does is that he sees, suddenly he wakes up one morning and he goes to the deck, and the deck is covered in this white substance, and he's like really, and he thinks that why have all these people now, these are the people that are enslaving him and that he's in this boat, why are they throwing salt on the ground? And so he sort of like goes and he speaks to a deckhand, and he says, what is all of this? And he's touching it and he's feeling it and it's cold, and he talks about this as realizing he's eventually told that this substance that he can feel is actually snow. So he's in Falmouth. Falmouth is a place that I've recently actually travelled to as part of actually sort of mapping some of the aspects of Equiana's journey. And here it's you're seeing sort of like imagery here in terms of it's called Pendennis Shipyard, and it's a shipyard that relevates ships. It was
so if that's better than that,
yeah,
then I'd go with that. But at the same time, people do have rights, and if that makes sense.
Yeah. What sort of human rights do you think might be violated by that?
It depends what their freedoms are like whilst they're on there.
Yeah.
If it's treated like a hotel where they're allowed in and out,
yeah,
then obviously that wouldn't be too much of a breach. But at the same time, people do run off because they know they might get sent away, don't they?
Yeah.
By the civil servants in the Home Office. But then I gave a very clear message when I went into the Home Office to the Permanent Secretary. I said what I expect from the civil service is their the best possible information they have and the best possible advice. I do not want them to try to give me what they think I want to hear. They must give me the best information and the best advice. What I then do with it is my political decision. But I want the very best from them. And I think by and large we did get that. We also got them into a position where they were more ready to raise issues at an earlier stage. Sadly, there were a couple, Windrush obviously was one of them. The other was, if you recall, there was an issue around recently had an issue around the passport office, but there was an issue around the passport office where it was clear there had been problems brewing, but they hadn't surfaced them to ministers. And as a result, we had to deal with a bigger problem than we would have done had we caught it earlier. So I said that I was trying to get them to surface problems at an earlier stage, but also that sense that we were working as a team, ministers and civil service together, but it was the civil servants advise and the ministers decide.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry about the suit. Right opposite the gentleman on the aisle, if you continue waving, yeah, there we go, if you can get the mic, keep waving and the mic will come to you. And then, after that, right behind the road. Hello.
Hi, Pamela Odih, Goldsmiths University. My question is in relation to migration policy. Given your recent reconception of the hostile environment, Home Office, Conservative government policy, what is your opinion about the present use of barge vessels to house asylum-seeking migrants?
Well, look, the government is faced with a difficult situation in that they have a large number of asylum seekers to accommodate. There's a lot of concern in parts of the country about the use of hotel accommodation. Not in the sense so much, I mean, the Holiday Inn in Maidenhead is in my constituency, has been taken over by contractors to house asylum seekers, for example. But in some places it's meant that businesses, wedding businesses and so forth, have found it very difficult to continue. So it's having an impact on a number of places, so the government is looking for alternatives in order to do that. The real answer, of course, is to find a way of reducing the asylum backlog and dealing with asylum cases quickly, so that people are not having to be put up in accommodation for so long. But this is not a problem that has occurred just now. It's occurred under my predecessors. It occurred when I was in the Home Office. We had a significant backlog we had to deal with. But if you can get a system, the idea is if you get a system that is fair, but is working smoothly, we're able to deal with cases in a timely manner, then that's better for everybody, frankly, and government wouldn't have to be making these sorts of decisions.
Thanks for your question. And the row.
Here's a portrait of Sir John Hawkins, notorious merchant slaver, given permission by Queen Elizabeth to traffic, transport slaves captured from Africa, transported to the Americas. In a letter written in 1581 is evidence that this was endorsed by Queen Elizabeth I. Although there are very strong abolitionist links, this is apparently from pamphlets, abolitionist pamphlets. And significantly, on the Harding Equiano in 1786 came to Plymouth as a commissary for provisions and stores to inspect the preparations of the repatriation to Sierra Leone. Of black people in England. The project was deemed by Equiano as one of his worst decisions as he went forward in the abolitionist movement. So it was actually hosting the BB Stockholm which was a migrant ship that was intended to use to actually transport illegal migrants. So it's quite a significant space. Okay. So he from Falmouth he travels and to Deptford initially, and in Deptford and here he then travels with Captain Pascal out of England into various parts of Europe and is involved in various sort of war and confrontations. Now, so going on to the 1760s. So in the 1760s, he travels again with Captain Pascal, who basically is his enslaver. And here, though, he actually, in Portsmouth, so he arrives in Portsmouth and he actually is befriended by a man called Daniel Queen, who's about 40 years old. And he is a well-educated man, and he is responsible for dressing and attending to the captain. Now, interestingly, this Daniel Queen is actually also very keen to actually be able to provide skills to Equiano, and he teaches Equiano how to shave and dress hair a little, which becomes an important. So he actually talks about how, and if you can see here, he says he taught me to shave and dress hair a little, and also to read in the Bible, explaining many passages to me which I did not comprehend. So he's starting to look. So previously he's talked about hair in terms of subjugation and denigration, and the way that he's actually been able to represent and try to comprehend these enslavers, this long hair, for example, that he talks about with the enslavers. And now in Portsmouth, he's meeting Daniel Queen, and Queen is actually now teaching him how to dress hair and teaching him the skill of how to dress hair. And this becomes quite important. But in Deptford, okay, in the 1760s, on the 10th of December, a very disconcerting situation arises, and he's sold in Deptford. And he talks about how, I mean, obviously lacking agency as a slave who is now sold in Deptford. And he talks about how, so he says here, in pursuance of our orders, we sailed from Portsmouth for the Thames and arrived at Deptford the 10th of December, where we cast anchor just as it was high water. And he talks about how he was told that he was to be sold, and that he was really struck by the unexpectedness of this. And he talks about how he couldn't reply, and all he could do, and his books was also a signifier of how he was trying through education to actually be able to try to address this situation and of his experience. So he talks about how he gathered his books in his chests of, obviously these were going to be sort of very sort of meager clothes, okay? And then so then he's sold, and he's sold to a person called Mr. King. Now, this is actually interesting, because when he's sold to Mr. King at this time, this is a really, is always problematic, but becomes increasingly politically problematic to actually have slaves and to have slaves in England. And so Mr. King's relation to him, although he has bought him as a slave, he's keen to actually treat him, as he says, he doesn't want to treat him as a common slave. So Equiano talks about how Mr. King actually asks him about the skills that he has. And so he says that he has some arithmetic, but he also says that he can shave and dress hair, okay, pretty well. So this notion that, you know, the skill that he gained from David Quinn was actually now a resource that he's now using to actually be able to sort of culturally exchange to this new enslaver, to actually be able to better his condition of enslavement. So hair goes from being something of subjugation and something of the sort of the conditions of enslavement to, yes, a condition of enslavement, but something that he's using in agency to try to actually be able to alleviate his condition or add value to his sort of furtherance of existence, or to add value to desire to keep him in good countenance. So hair, so he talks about how I told him I knew something of seamanship and could shave and dress hair pretty well. And so hair becomes a signifier for a way in which he can be able to trade in a very sort of meager economy of some level of alleviations of the conditions of his enslavement. Okay, so as Chan has said, in 1766, now he has prior to that been able to gather through his skills in terms of hairdressing and in terms of various forms of bartering, etc. He's gathered some funds, and so he's gathered the sum of £40, which was used to actually sell him. But he's gathered the sum of £40, and he's able then to actually be able to approach Robert King, who actually agrees to enable him to have freedom, what they call manumission, enable him manumission. So he talks about how on the 11th day of July, so today was obviously, this is the 16th, but it's around this time. So the 11th day of July, 1766, okay, he actually achieves manumission, whereby he is actually bought his freedom. Okay, and so as Chan and Alex have said, he goes on then, okay, to now post manumission and in a situation whereby he is a free person, but a free person within an economy that has previously sold his person. So he's now trying to sort of trade the skills that he has within an economy that is, sort of barely recognizing him as a free individual, although he's obviously achieved this, and there is still slavery. Because obviously it's not abolished until 1807. So he's using skills here, and I think with some agency. So he talks about these skills in relation to hairdressing. And here, when he's encountering another possible employer, he puts forward the skills of hairdressing, and he convinces this employer to actually procure him, okay, as a hairdresser. Yes, so he talks about how they then promised to assist me in this, and soon after they recommended me to a gentleman whom I had known before, one Captain O'Hara, who treated me with much kindness and procured me a master, a hairdresser in Coventry Court, Haymarket, with whom he placed me. And I was, the skill of hair, and hair as a signifier, becomes part of a sort of a cultural economy that he is using to actually be able to, present himself, to actually be able to achieve an income, and also be able to value his worth. Okay. Now, interestingly, he actually also here, in conjunction with working with a Dr. Iving in Pall Mall, okay, he's actually practicing as a hairdresser. So for a project that's about hairdressing in Deptford, this is really the roots. So finally, he talks about how in February 1768, I hired myself to Dr. Charles Iving in Pall Mall, so celebrated for his successful experiments in making seawater fresh. And here I had plenty of hairdressing to improve my hand. This gentleman was an excellent master. He was exceedingly kind and good-tempered, and allowed me in the evenings to attend my schools, which I esteemed a great blessing. Therefore, I thanked God for him and used all my diligence to improve the opportunity. So he becomes this hairdresser operating in Pall Mall. Okay, so as Chan and Alex have said, he becomes very important in relation to the civil rights movement and the abolitionist movement, and his book is published in many editions. He self-publishes, and literally, because he kept the rights to his book, was incredibly well sort of pronounced as an author, and is one of the key Black authors, Black authors from the slave era. And And so he provides this an account. His first edition ends in 1764. The third edition goes on to 1766 and beyond into his work in terms of the abolitionist movement, etc. Now, so that gives you a backstory in terms of hairdressing and the roots of hairdressing in relation to Deptford. Okay, but so we have from the sort of late 18th into the 19th century, we have the rise of colonialism. So here we've got the extension of a country's interest through imposition onto a otherwise sovereign country through forms of subjugation and the turning of that country into its colony. And so during colonialism, from the work that I've been doing, for example, in terms of British colonial Nigeria, the colonial control of the indigenous people was very much also in terms of racialized characteristics and racialized characteristic of hair. And so what we see here is for example, the control of festivals, which would have ordinarily been a celebration of hair, and where the colonial, in terms of British colonial rule of Nigeria, where it starts to impose some level of rudimentary education, the shaving of hair, as part of the enabling of the young person to actually enter into the education system. And so in the colonial control, there is very real evidence that hair was actually a feature of colonial control because of its role in terms of agency and in terms of the celebration of festivals. Now, what's very interesting is that, okay, in neo-colonial times, we see, so this is like a continuity post-independence, post the dismantling of colonialism, the continuity of situations of dependency in relation to colonies. And so in these neo-colonial times, what we see are sort of continued economic forms of dependency, but also the making into commodities and into fetishistic commodities of indigenous African culture. And here we're very much seeing how African traditions in relation to hair crafting have become almost like a sort of a cultural touristic industry that is basically being practiced for money by the indigenous people for tourists. So these are contemporary images here of indigenous people in Africa who are encouraged to dress their hair in the traditional ways so as to actually provide sort of entertainment and to provide sort of a touristic cultural economy for foreigners. And so I see this as being a sort of neo-colonial control through hair and treating hair as a commodity that can be traded in a touristic industry. Now, in relation to migration stories, okay, so all of that I've told you before, in terms of Equiano, in terms of colonialism, and in terms of neo-colonialism, is brought with us in terms of migration hair stories, and also the way in which these sort of stories of the African history as sort of illustrated through hair crafting, how these have actually entered into aspects of mythology and aspects of mythology that have become very much commodified and re-spoken by migrants as being almost a way of actually speaking the mythologies that have been sort of commodified in respect to what the migrant, who the migrant is. And so we have, so for example, a sort of migrant story that obviously we think has authenticity is the stories that our mothers told us in terms of how to craft our hair. But then we also have a migrant story that is increasingly told that aligns with mythologies around Black Africa. And this mythology is this notion of the slaves actually weaving into their hair food so that they could actually be able to have some sustenance while they traveled. This actually becomes stories that are being told. Okay, so now into the 1960s. So into the 1960s, here we've got, in the 70s, we've got Prince Charles actually greeting people in Deptford. And here on the right-hand side, we've got hairdressers in Deptford. Okay, the demographics of Deptford. So Deptford is, so 25.8% of Deptford's residents have an ethnicity of white British, okay, which means that the remainder are non-white British. So compared to, okay, so, and if we look at the statistics here, so the largest demographic in terms of ethnicity in Deptford is Black African at 22.4%. Caribbean is 9.9%. Okay, now to my study with my students. So we were trying to understand issues in relation to culture and identity in respect to Black hairdressers, bringing to bear the sort of these issues that I've mentioned around colonial histories, around sort of traditional African histories in relation to hair, migration stories, and also sort of neo-colonial trends. So what my students and I have been doing is actually, as part of my study has involved interviewing MPs and interviewing human rights advocates in relation to hair advocacy and trying to prevent race-based forms of hair discrimination. But one strand of my work has been with first-year students looking from the Culture and Society module within the Sociology programs at Goldsmiths University of London. Okay, and so what we've done is actually various semiological studies of Afro hairdressers, and we've looked at these the sort of the signifying practices of these hairdressers and how these are speaking to the history of migration in relation to this increasingly growing population of Black Africans within Deptford, and also the purposes of the hairdressers. So I wonder, could, Alex, would you be able to speak to your study?
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Okay,
So what we looked into were the physical appearances of a lot of these shops, and we noticed what they had in common was that they were like dimly lit. They were also very decorated in terms of like the marketing. Like you could just tell once you walked past and you had a look, you could just tell by like the color schemes and like the decorating that it was maybe a place that was quite attractive. And they had like pictures of the types of hairstyles that they offered, the type of services that they offered. They also had more than one service inside of the shop. So they would do nails, lashes, brows, and sometimes they would share. So you would have like a hairdresser shop and then you would have a barber shop in the same space as well. Was even looking at posters, different type of services that they would have on the posters. So they would offer like room shares and stuff. And it was quite interesting because almost every shop that we came across, they were sharing. They either shared a space or they just had more than one service inside of the shop. But it was a great experience. It definitely taught me a lot about my own roots and in terms of the types of hairstyles that people are just willing to provide, the type of services that people are willing to provide inside of a shop, just more than one. So, yeah.
yes. Okay, Chan, did you want to talk to this one?
Yes. I did this research and photo collecting with Alex, and I found those barbershop are like they're very unique. not like other barbershop that I'm seeing before. So it's more like they have their own vibe and a style, and it's very obvious once you pass by, and you will be noticed that okay, this is a Caribbean style, or like you can sense very their strong culture. And also these barbershops are originally created to traditional hairstyling needs, like different type of Afro haircuts, like curls or dreadlocks. But like what Alex mentioned, they other than those hairdressing service, they also provide um, like food. For some barbershop, they also provide food or accessories and clothes. So those barbershop, it's like a small community, and you see people like they have a very open and a bright vibe, and you see people are chatting inside. So um and also in Deptford, most shop, I feel like they are family run, offering like kind of affordable prices. But also, you can see that they are struggling with their business. So, from this picture, like the photo that I took, you can see they're sharing this space with nail arts as well. So, I think so. They do this on one hand to reduce the rent, on the other hand they're kind of like trying to create more possibility to increase their income. So for me this is a very fresh and new experience to really observe those type of culture. Yeah, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Janine, do you want to tell us a bit about just your experiences of the hairdressers in your photo illustration? Okay, Janine, so
Okay.
yeah, so you're going to be muted at the moment. Okay. Okay, Kelvin, do you want to just jump in and tell us about your experiences?
Sure.
Good, thanks, Kelvin.
So for me, I think quite similarly to Alex, it was just quite interesting to look and understand and actually look in detail. I feel like I've passed by a lot of these places throughout my life, been inside them, but never really took time to really analyze the differences and similarities between them all and what they mean. I think as much as the hair shops and you get in a service, I think it's also there for community. I think you meet a lot of like-minded people within your community. You talk about issues that are affecting your community, and often, I suppose, women seek sisterhood in those spaces as well, and knowledge and that sort of thing. I think it quite similarly also about sharing the space is really important as well, as it cuts down costs, and often it can be difficult, especially in central London, to maintain a shop in central London. So I think sharing space is not only economical, but it's also good for someone who likes to get multiple things done. Like you can get your hair done and your nails done in the same place, and it's just a great and much more efficient thing. I think also in terms of the style of recently, it has there only been more black people in PR, media, and advertising. I think when it comes to things like black hair shops, there's always been black models, hair models that are on the front of the shops. You get to see the various styles, and for a long time, I think that's the only place where you would really get to see those images in broad daylight out in the open. And I think also very unique styles in terms of the font and the typography and the use of color. I think is very similar to African and Caribbean culture in general when it comes to color schemes and that sort of thing. But now more than ever, everyone likes the gray, the beige, the pastel colors. But I see that most of the hair salons still maintain the vibrant color schemes and the loud designs that are from our homeland. So I thought those were really interesting too. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Calvin. Thank you. Okay, and so my students and I, and as you can see, very, very informed and very eloquent in the descriptions of these hairdressers. They really did do the time, walk the streets, looked at these hairdressers, used their various decoding skills that they learnt in culture and society to actually be able to deconstruct the semiology of the hairdressers. And as you can see from the accounts provided there, I'm exceptionally proud of their achievements. Okay, and so these photo elicitations were all transcribed and provided to a poet, a speaking poet, who actually constructed them into a long form poem. And so what I'd like to do here, okay, is actually to read the long form poem. So the poem is Afro-textured hair, the most diverse and unique hair type on planet Earth. So it's a picture of me as doing some modeling when I was a child. Okay, so yeah, now I just wondered how to do this. So do you think who would like to actually read this? So this is the poem that and sorry, and just to recognize this was actually this flip book once again showing the techniques and skills that my students have developed within this project. So this was actually the this flip book was actually created by Olivia Morris Brown, who really has done a lot of work on this flip book. Okay, so who would like to actually, or we could all read it together. Who would like to read it? The poem? Oh, yeah?
Maybe we can read together.
Yeah, let's read together, okay? So let's read the poem. So from coils, okay? From coils to curls, locks to twists, from braids to fades, Afro-textured hair is vastly versatile, evidenced through our wide range of natural hairstyles. Now, who would like to read the next part? Or what I could do is I'll read the page, and who would like to continue from there?
Styles that are deeply rooted in culture, tradition, and spirituality. Our hair care rituals, these sacred events where we wash, we cleanse and comb, we style and braid, we twist and adorn, we oil and feed, detangle, distress. We nourish our roots while protecting and preparing our hair for the harsh environments in which we live.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Yeah, okay.
Customs and ceremonies that have been passed down through generations, those that have survived through centuries, to instill a sense of pride in our appearance and our identities. We meet together.
Yeah, let's read it together. Everyone together, okay? Everyone that's on mic, okay? Would you like to just read? So if we read it together, that way we're kind of embodying it as well. Okay, so does everyone want to try it? So if you take off your mic, Janine, if you take off your mic, okay? We meet together.
We meet together in
community spaces.
Community spaces.
In our living room.
In our living room.
In saloons.
At barbershop. Placed on High Street. Across the country,
across the globe, across the diaspora, places we go to nurture and celebrate our blackness, centers of black love,
community hubs, portals to home where the importance of positive representation, self-love, beauty, and black joy are understood. Yet we are still told by society that some hair is better than others, that some hair is bad while other hair is good, and that the hair that grows naturally from our heads can be unprofessional, unacceptable, problematic, and a reason for dismissal.
From as early as Go ahead.
Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
From as early as 4 or 5, our Black children face discrimination for natural hair and natural hairstyles, discrimination that sadly follows most for the rest of their life. For we have lived lifetimes being told that Afro-textured hair is less presentable, that it affects our intelligence and performance, or that somehow we are more efficient when we are wearing wigs. The closer our hair appears to resemble Eurocentric beauty standards, the more acceptable we become.
Too many have internalized these colonial ideals and ideologies, leaving many traumatized due to these attacks on our livelihoods, our cultures, our identities, and our humanity. We need to we need to call out the racism, the discrimination, the unconscious bias, the ludicrous.
Wash and cleanse our minds of this colonial mentality, repair the damage done through centuries of mistreatment, misinformation and misrepresentation. Speak out in support of those who have faced or are facing Afro-textured hair discrimination for whatever reason, situation, location or setting.
For this, a personal hair journey where we learn to relove our hair, we relearn the significance of our practice and routines. We take pride in our appearance, our identities, our culture, and heritages.
For these crowns are blessed, majestic, spiritual, and deeply rooted in pride and resistance. Afro-textured hair, a lifelong journey.
Excellent. Well, that was so well done. Well done. Well done. Okay. So in recent times, I've traveled. I went to Truro, and to meet the first sort of Black hairdressers in Truro and quite possibly in Cornwall, and some of the things that she conveyed. Her name is Sissy. Some of the things that she conveyed had also resonance to the things that we have found in our study of hairdressing in Deptford. So that she talks about how the hairdressers was a hub for the community, very much so. And she talks about this sort of culturally valuing the skill of hairdressing, and how hairdressing of the Afro-textured hair was a means of actually sort of sustaining history and the history of our colonial past, recognizing and remembering that, and remembering migration and remembering diaspora. But it's also a means of actually instilling pride and a recognition of the beauty and the value and the distinction, okay, of Afro-textured hair. Okay, and so that's mainly what I wanted to share with you all. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Yes, so Jamila, you're still here. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So are there any? So could you? Is there any feedback you would like to give? That's so lovely to see you, Jamila. Oh, bless. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, and
sorry, no, I was going to say I really enjoyed it. Sorry, I cannot put my camera on. I was at Parliament yesterday and I'm just exhausted and I just don't look the best. So, but I will say it was very good. It was very interesting. I wasn't familiar, let's say, with the connections of enslavement and Deptford. So I actually found that quite interesting. So I've been to Deptford a few times, and that just never occurred to me that there were links there. So that was really interesting. And I think the analysis of the hair shops was also really interesting, especially the idea of it being like very dim lit and just like loads of things on display and just almost a bit chaotic, whilst almost inviting us to go in there simultaneously, which I thought was interesting. And then this idea around hair shops also having other things attached to it, barbershops having other things attached. So on the one hand, it's very community, but on the other hand, it's a sign that it's maybe not sustainable, right? Everybody's sort of banding together. So no, I think you guys did a really good job. I found it really, really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And team, did you want to say anything as we close the project? Okay, yeah.
I enjoyed the project overall. Very grateful for the opportunity. So thanks for everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. So thank you so much for being here. So we'll close the meeting now. And if you want to actually find out anything more about the project and about its development, please do actually write to me. My name is Pamela Odih. Yes, my name is Pamela Odih, and my email is p.odih@gold.ac.uk. And so thank you. Thank you very much. It was, yes, I was. Okay, excellent. Okay then. Okay, so we'll close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.